Gasho, please. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Anda Butsu, Namo Anda Butsu, Namo Anda Butsu. Okay, thank you. So our discussion today is an excerpt from this very classic book, River of Fire, River of Water, by the late Taitetsu Unno, who was a Buddhist professor at Smith College and also a Shin Buddhist minister. He's also the older brother of Reverend Tetsuo Unno. It's confusing because one is Tai Tetsu and the other is Tetsuo. Both, just amazing ministers and very learned about Jodo Shinshu. Tai Tetsu Unno's son, Mark Unno, is professor of Buddhism at the University of Oregon. And we've had Tai Unno here before, but many years ago. We've had Reverend Tetsuo Unno on numerous occasions, and we've also had Mark Unno. So first, take out this picture. I wanted to explain about the title of the book, River of Fire, River of Water. So Unno Sensei takes the title of his book from this famous parable in Pure Land Buddhism, Shin Buddhism. Today we chanted the Shoshinge starting from Zendo, Zendo do kumyo. So Zendo is one of the Chinese Pure Land masters. In Shin Buddhism, there's 7 masters that Shinran Shonin honors, and Zendo is the number 3 master in China. This parable of the River of Fire, River of Water was created by Zendo. His Chinese name is Shandao. So this is the parable that he creates. The parable is talking about spiritual, existential sort of state of being. Okay, so this is not a literal thing, but Zendo or Shandao is talking about a spiritual impasse, spiritual crisis that he himself must have experienced in order for him to create this amazing parable. So there's 2 rivers. The first time I read the parable, I couldn't picture what this river would look like, but it's a river to the right. So it goes this way. The river to the right is a river of water, and you see the waves, and the river to the left is a river of fire. So a river of fire to the left, river of water to the right. And across, separating these 2 rivers of fire and water is a narrow, narrow path, only 4 inches wide. And I had to blow up this photo from his book. The image is not real clear. You can see a person on the path, on that narrow path, right sort of 1/3 of the way across the river. So that is the traveler. That is the traveler. Now this traveler is in this impasse because from behind him there are beasts and bandits chasing him, threatening to kill him. So from behind he's been chased. He comes to this river. He can't go to the right because the river goes endlessly to the right. He can't go to the left because this river of fire goes endlessly to the left. If he stays where he is, these beasts and bandits are going to kill him. But there's only this narrow little white path in between these 2 rivers. So should I take this path? It looks like if I take the path, the river of water might get me, the river of fire might get me. What should I do? What should I do? And he's standing before he ventures out on this narrow path. He hears 2 voices. First, he hears a voice from behind saying, "Go, go." And he hears a voice from the other side of the river saying, "Come, come. You'll be okay. I'll protect you." So this is this parable. And there's a lot of metaphor. We won't go into all of it today, but it's talking about a spiritual impasse. And maybe you've experienced something like this in your own life, where you can't go back, you can't go forward, you can't go left, you can't go to the right. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to do. Life just presents such chaos to you that maybe you feel like this traveler on this narrow path between the two rivers of fire and water. But the way this parable is explained is the voice from behind is Shakyamuni Buddha, historical Buddha, saying, go, take the path. Although it's narrow, it's okay. And the voice from the other side is the voice of Amida Buddha, timeless Buddha, saying, come. So with the encouragement of the voice from behind him, the voice from in front of him, the traveler enters the path. And then, I've heard many explanations and interpretations of this parable before. One of my teachers, Reverend Kubose, in his study commented that once the traveler decides to take the path, once the traveler decides to move forward, suddenly this 4 inches becomes very wide. Before, when he's not sure what to do, it's this narrow, tenuous path. But once the traveler says, okay, what have I got to lose? I can't go back, I can't go left, I can't go right. I might as well go ahead. Once they make that decision, that conviction, then the path widens. So it's a beautiful parable. Shinran Shonin quotes this parable in his writings. So obviously he must have felt like the traveler on this journey. So very, very famous parable from Buddhism, especially from the Pure Land Buddhist tradition, river of fire, river of water. So we're going to read an excerpt from this book by Taitetsu Unno on arrogance. He's going to talk about like 4 or 5 kinds of arrogance. I never knew there was so many different kinds of arrogance. So let me read through this. While humility is a natural and spontaneous expression of an awakened person, our innate tendency as foolish beings is the very opposite, arrogance that appears in various subtle forms. Buddhists have paid great attention to this fact, for it is a perennial problem and upsets the equilibrium of life. Buddhist literature speaks of 7 types of arrogance: common arrogance, great arrogance, multiple arrogance, arrogance of believing in enduring selfhood, vain arrogance, humble arrogance. See, what's that? Humble arrogance. Isn't that kind of a contradiction of terms? And deceitful arrogance. Oh my gosh, there's 7 kinds of arrogance, okay? So first of all, Buddhism loves to make lists of things. And so here is another example of 7 kinds of arrogance. The first, common arrogance, is to feel superior to someone who is clearly inferior in ability, talent, intelligence, appearance, status, and so on. This happens, for example, when we see the homeless wandering in our cities. We feel clearly superior to them. Yet, if we should feel pity, but do nothing, it is another disguised form of arrogance. But this common arrogance also occurs when we think that we are better than someone of equal status or achievement. Great arrogance is to think that one is better than an equal, but it also includes the notion that one is just as good as someone clearly superior. We find this frequently when we identify ourselves with the best and brightest in a group to which we belong. It can be family, class, race, creed, or nation. Sometimes a sports team, social club, college fraternity, business firm, and so on. We act as if we are better than others, not because of our individual worth, but because of identification with a recognized group. Multiple arrogance, or literally arrogance piled on arrogance, arrogance piled on top of arrogance, is to feel superior to someone who has everything: money, status, looks, talent, popularity, and influence. This is done by claiming some special knowledge or unique possession, however trivial it may be, that the superior person may lack. We find this in academic one-upmanship among scholars who pride themselves in the knowledge of trifling minutiae. From what scholars tell me, this is just the world of scholars, the academic conferences and stuff, they just cut each other down to pieces, in terms of scholasticism. We are all subject to these types of arrogance, and very few of us are immune to them. I have a friend, for example, who suffered several heart attacks, requiring a bypass operation each time. The condition of his heart is so poor that doctors have refused further operations. But he dislikes talking about it because once he mentions it in public, there's always someone who tries to show him up. Oh, you've had a heart attack? I've had 2. Oh yeah? Yours was a triple bypass? I had a quadruple bypass. Is that right? You almost died. Well, I was dead until the doctors revived me. And so it goes on and on. This reminds me of the story of Christian desert fathers who were trying to outdo themselves in self-mortification, dying unto oneself. A monk brags to another, saying, "I'm deader than you are." So we can relate to that, right? I had a double bypass. Oh, I had a triple bypass. The remaining 4 types are other forms of arrogance that are not usually recognized as such. Arrogance of enduring selfhood refers to the unquestioned belief in the existence of a substantial I. Buddhism teaches the error of grasping the 5 aggregates, or skandhas, as constituting an enduring selfhood: form, or body, sensation, perception, psychic disposition, and consciousness. Although Western philosophers as diverse as Hume, Kant, Nietzsche, and William James have shown the non-existence of a substantial self, it plays an unquestioned role in our daily life. As long as we assume that such a fictive self is real and enduring, we are the epitome of arrogance. The negation of the conventional self does not mean that we should not organize our life and make plans for the future. Rather, it urges us to be fully aware of the fleeting nature of existence and not place our whole being on such an undependable self. Buddhists live with such an understanding, as exemplified by Genza, who once said, "As long as man lives, he must work and plan for 1,000 years. Even this Genza plants persimmon and chestnut trees. I have lots of work to do in this world, but we must listen to the teaching as if there's no tomorrow." Vain arrogance is to make false claims about attainment, especially of some kind of spirituality. In the first place, true attainment is not possible within conventional thinking, based on the subject-object dichotomy, which inevitably objectifies everything and prohibits self-knowledge. Moreover, if one has realized true attainment, there is no need to talk about it, since all dichotomies have been transcended. There are variations to the following story, but once there was a young samurai who begged to study with a master to perfect the art of swordsmanship. In the interview, he asked how long it would take to perfect the art by practicing hard 2 hours every day. The master replied, 4 years. Then he asked about practicing 4 hours every day, and the reply was 8 years. But when he asked how long it would take to become a master himself, practicing 8 hours a day, the answer was never. True mastery of any art is endless, involving both bodily and mental training. Hence the motto of no actors, always keep the beginner's mind. Humble arrogance, this is a fascinating one, humble arrogance is encountered when people feign humility to attract attention and gain some kind of recognition. There are people who seek sympathy and pity from others to bolster their self-image. Both Christianity and Buddhism teach the virtue of meekness and humility on the religious path. But when this is claimed apart from the truly religious life, it is just another way of seeking special attention. Deceitful arrogance is to inflate oneself by bragging, speaking half-truths, and engaging in double talk. This is, of course, ego assertion and self-aggrandizement in their most blatant forms. The religious person is fully aware of this potential in one's own being, so the critical eye is turned inward, although our common tendency is to point fingers at others. We all desire to overcome these forms of arrogance, but the more we try, the more we realize its immense difficulty. The least we can do is to be realistic, admitting our inability to be completely free of them. But this admission is also very, very painful. In fact, this inability is another evidence of a limited karmic being. Genza was well known for counseling people on Shin faith. Once a man said to him, "I'm a hypocrite. When I go to the temple, I sit in front of Amida and enjoy saying the Nembutsu, but when I go home, I forget everything completely. I'm a hypocrite." Thereupon, Genza replied, "But if you admit that you're a hypocrite, that's good, because it's really hard to be a real hypocrite." So that's a very Shin Buddhistic type of awareness. And I think Shinran Shonin saw how he himself was a deep hypocrite. And that's what led him to leave the monastic tradition to follow Honen. On Mount Hiei, he looked like an esteemed, learned, very ethical monk, but inside, a beautiful woman would walk by and, he would melt. So he realized the sort of insincerity of himself, how he appeared to be deeply religious, but inside all of this ego mind and arrogance. Okay, any thoughts on this essay? So now we know 7 kinds of arrogance in Buddhism. Any thoughts by anyone on this essay?
Well, just as an example of the humble arrogance, I believe that's really what we're commonly calling humble bragging these days, right? So the market has crashed in housing, and you're like, your Facebook post or something is like, "I'm so happy I've been able to buy this $5 million home," and it's like, okay, right. So just as an example, that's all.
Yeah, Reverend Kodani, I've often told this example. He said, "I noticed that if I ever make an anonymous donation, I'm the first one to tell someone about it." He said once he made an anonymous donation to his temple, and then every month the minister goes over the donations of the treasurer, and the treasurer goes, "Hey, Sensei, we got this kind of large anonymous donation. I wonder who it was." And he said, "Well, don't tell anyone, but it was." So, humble arrogance. That's why, to me, that's why Shinran Shonin never in his writings, he never says he has gained enlightenment. Or he never makes that kind of statement. Where in other Buddhist traditions, Zen masters, they talk about their enlightenment experience. But Shinran Shonin never mentions that in his writings, because I think he has this awareness of humble arrogance. How could anyone ever, if being enlightened means to be selfless, how could anyone ever state that to others without a little bit of arrogance or conceit there? Well, I really shouldn't be saying this, but the other day I got enlightened. You're reeking with conceit and arrogance. See? So the person who's really awakened, they don't say anything. They just go about living their very selfless life. See? Okay, thanks, Joe. Anyone else? Thoughts or comments on this essay? Yeah. John.
Well, this on the parable about the
Yes.
fire and water. It made me think about this movie, Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones and the what do you call it? The Last Crusade. Well, he's trying to cross this chasm.
Yes.
And they tell him it's there, but you can't see it.
That's right.
And so it's a matter of faith that
A matter
it's
of
there.
faith, right.
And once he steps on it, it shows up. And so I thought, maybe they stole that from this parable.
Yeah, that's a kind of a good similar example. Because the traveler doesn't have faith in the beginning. He doesn't have, but he feels that the narrow white path is too treacherous, and until he hears the voice from behind and the voice ahead encouraging him, then he is able to take that first step. Anyone else? Oh, Christina?
Sure. Oh, it's okay. Then I'll just not be so loud. For me, like, obviously, this whole thing was fantastic, but I'm not really surprised because I love all your stuff, as you know. But the thing about the hypocrisy that is, like, so funny to me, because I'm such a hypocrite. No, I mean, seriously, like, because, I mean, and I can just think of a thing right now, like, I'm super guilty, like, I used to be, well, I still kind of am sometimes, it's bad, critical of people that are vegan and feel superior about it. And I'm hypocritical because I'll be like, well, you know, animals are being tortured and they're not going after the corporations that are torturing their animals, so all they're doing is creating another industry, right? And I'll say stuff like that. But then I'm like, but wait a second, you know, like, well, what am I doing? I'm still eating that stuff. And it's not necessarily always 100% grass-fed or living under good eating conditions, but I'm just like, oh, my nutritional needs can't have too many carbs, and a vegan diet is really high in carbs, you know? So it's like, I'm all about, like, I hate to admit it, but it's like, I do what's, like, most convenient for me. And then I'll be like, well, I won't buy something with slave labor, but then I'll be like, oh, but I'll buy my clothes, and that was made most likely by some, you know, little communist kid in China. And so I feel, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make me feel good inside. So I feel like no matter what, when I open up my wallet, I'm hurting someone, and I feel terrible about it. So I'm just a hypocrite all over the place, and I probably should not, like, have these really strong opinions about people's own superiority, because look what I'm doing. I'm being so, you know, arrogant myself and thinking that I'm making such great decisions all the time, and clearly I'm not. I mean, every time I'm eating vegetables, I mean, I'm hurting them. Every time I'm cooking them, they're experiencing sensations too. I always feel terrible.
Thanks for sharing that, Christina. Eugene?
I was wondering, when Renyo or Shinran or maybe even Sakyamuni himself moved away from the main body of teachings, do you think that involved a little dose of arrogance, or the thinking that that body of work I don't agree with, and so I'm going to go on my own path? But there needs to be a little bit of that ego or arrogance that makes you think that what I'm thinking might be better than what everybody else is thinking, which ends up leading to new thinking.
So meaning like Shakyamuni Buddha was kind of a revolutionary of his time, going against the sort of traditional religion of his time, and Honen and Shinran also going against the traditional religion of their time, being kind of revolutionaries and not having a sense of kind of a little bit ego there, that
or rebelliousness that would drive you.
Right. So I think they see. I think they see their sense of their ego as they're doing that, but also even deeper is the deep conviction that this must be shared. See, so Shakyamuni Buddha, even though it's going against the Indian Hinduist thought of his time, this insight was such that it had to be shared, and so it kind of really he's selfless in that sharing. And so I think the same with Honen and Shinran, even though you might say, well, they're just being egotistical against the tradition, they were revolutionaries in sharing what they felt needed to be shared at that time in terms of the religious context.
So do you think they characterized it more as an experience that how should I that wasn't about them, but they were the vehicle?
Sort of,
perhaps.
yes, right. And Shinran even makes those kind of statements. So he and Honen are exiled to remote provinces of Japan by the Orthodox Buddhism. Okay, the Orthodox Buddhism is threatened by their popularity because they're kind of sharing Buddhism to the masses, and so they get them exiled. Even a few of Honen's followers were executed. So, but Honen is sent to one province, Shinran is sent to this remote Japan seaside place called present-day Niigata. It snows up to the rooftops. See, it's really harsh winter conditions. But instead of instead of sort of egotistically saying harsh things against Mount Hiei, he says, oh, now I have the opportunity to share the Dharma with people in this remote province on the Japan seaside. See, I wouldn't be able to say something like that. If Reverend Umezu said, well, Reverend Harada, you've been at Orange County, a long time. We don't have any temples in Alaska. I want you to go to Anchorage, Alaska, and start a Buddhist temple there. I'd go, oh, no, I can't golf there? Why do I have to go to Alaska? But Shinran Shonin just, I have this opportunity now. And even though he's exiled. So you have to be pretty selfless to be able to do that, I think. Yeah, Kevin?
From things I've read as far as Shinran, I think he always said that he was a student of the Dharma. He never claimed to be a teacher.
That's right.
Even though he had these many followers, he never said, I'm their teacher. He always said, I'm a student myself, and this is what I've found for myself that he could be authentic with, his findings. And he also never said, and you must follow my teachings. He said, find out for yourself. Test it in your own life. And find something authentic for yourself. So I think it sounds pretty selfless to me. I mean, I'm sure there was ego involved because he was a human. But to the best of his ability, it sounded pretty sincere to me. I mean, what else could you say? I'm not a teacher. I'm a student, and I found this to be true to my life. Don't say this has to be true to your life. I'm not saying this has to be true to your life. Find out for yourself. Try it out. Find your own truth and what's genuine for you. And to me, that's about as selfless statement any human could make. That's what I think.
Right. Excellent point, Kevin. Thanks for bringing that up. So yes, although he built a following, he never claimed to have any of his own disciples. That's Shinran Shonin. But he had, of course, a following. Many people were following him. Reverend Suji, the late Reverend Suji, he had that same attitude. We've had Greg Creech speak here before, on about Nikon therapy. So Greg Creech, when he met Reverend Suji at the Ekoji Temple, he was very impressed with him. And he said, I'd like to study under you. Could I study under you? And Reverend Suji says, well, we could study together. I'd love to study with you, so please come, we'll study together. So he had that same kind of attitude. Yeah, I'm not a master, but if you want to study the Dharma, well, let's study together. So Greg Creech studied with Reverend Suji for a few years and was very influenced by him. Maybe one more comment. Anyone else? I want to give you time to go buy Girl Scout cookies. Anyone else? Any thoughts on this essay today? Okay, well, thank you very much. And so we'll close with Gassho. Namo Amitabutsu. Namo Amitabutsu. Namo Amitabutsu. Namo Amitabutsu.